Today on Voices for Change, cops in schools, the nationwide movement to remove officers from campus.
I wouldn't say that the SRO program has been overtly negative, but it hasn't created the kind of change that we want to see.
And it's a very bad mistake.
Plus, racial equity in the classroom.
The child's not broken. The system's broken. The society's broken.
And how to talk to your kids about social justice and the world around us.
Foster inclusivity and foster celebration of different races. That is our role as adults.
Good morning. Welcome to this KTVU special Voices for Change. I'm Greg Lee. Every Sunday for the next few weeks, our goal is to dig deeper into the important and urgent issues facing our community and beyond. We should begin by saying happy Pride to everyone celebrating online this weekend. This week, we're taking a look at racial inequality, social justice, and police reform through the lens of education.
That the community's hella happy right now.
This week, the Oakland School Board voted to eliminate the
y'all.
district's police department. It follows protests nationwide calling for schools to end contracts with police. The measure redirects $2.5 million in funding from police to students, but a safety plan must now be created without police. In San Francisco, the Board of Education voted to cut ties with SFPD, withdrawing from a contract, and includes a $46,000 district payment to cover the cost of a police liaison.
I wouldn't say that the SRO program has been overtly negative, but it hasn't created the kind of change that we want to see.
SFPD said it hasn't made any decisions about the SRO program yet. San Francisco and Oakland join a growing list of school districts nationwide to take such action. However, in two of the three largest districts in the nation, LA and Chicago, school boards rejected proposals to defund or remove police. For more on this, we are joined by the woman you just heard from, Commissioner Allison Collins from the San Francisco Board of Education. Allison, thank you for joining us. I want to start by saying San Francisco did not have officers assigned to campuses. Rather, they responded to calls at schools. What drove the effort to end this contract?
Well, I think what we were up for a renewal of the MOU based on incidents that happened at Balboa High School. We had an MOU currently in place, and yet officers still responded in ways that violated student rights. They interviewed students without notifying parents or having parents present. They paraded students in front of the media that were not even involved in this situation. And so I think the community had a really large response, and it asked us to look back at the MOU and see if there was anything that we should have in there that wasn't in there. And there was a process of adding things, but I think reflecting on what's been going on recently, I think it became really clear that the MOU is not an effective way of managing the way police engage in our schools.
Allison,
and there was also, I'm sorry.
Sorry, as you see other districts nationwide following suit, what message does this send to particularly Black and brown students?
I think it validates, I think, what a lot of not just Black students, but Black parents have experienced with our education system. And this isn't just SF, this is across the nation, right? This is a national conversation. It's not just about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. This is a national conversation. And one of the things I think that was really impactful was in testimony that we got last Tuesday during the board meeting. The African American Parent Advisory Council read a letter, and they said, regardless of what our decision was going to be, they said they really wanted us to address the secret policing that goes on in our education system. And that pertains to, staff members calling the police, as well as, we have police coming in, but we also have staff members who've called the police on Black parents or Black students. Additionally, just the policing kind of behaviors. Dr. Monique Morris has done a lot of work on this in her work with Push Out, talking about how Black children get pushed out of our education system.
Allison, I want to ask you, you mentioned that African American Parent Advisory Council. A few of those members said they were concerned about this because it takes away perhaps the only positive relationship between the school district and police. What would be your response to them now?
Well, I'm also a member of the African American Parent Advisory Council. And if they expressed concern, and I hear it 100%. because, you know, we're so desperate as Black families to have support. And at the same time, one, you know, SRO isn't a system. And I would love it if the SFPD would actually, you know, those members that are in the SF Police Department that are serving as SROs, they should be actually working on the police department. They should be fixing, you know, because people are not having positive experiences overall with SFPD, and I can speak to that personally. You know, I've been you know, gotten into interactions with police officers once in a school and once outside of a Target where they escalate situations, and so there's something going on that's cultural in not just our police department but in across the nation, and that needs to be addressed. But we are a school district and we don't manage the police. So we need, I think to address our own culture, because we do participate, and we need to make sure that our schools are safe, our students and families are supported. And we're also, you know, examining anti-Black bias and things that lead to, you know, sometimes this secret policing that parents are talking about that gets directed at Black students and Black parents, and also Latinx, and, you know, certain communities are targeted, and they're treated differently, both in our schools and in the larger community.
Allison, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. I got to end it there. Appreciate your time this morning and for your insight.
Thank you.
Organizations that represent school resource officers say they're unsettled by these decisions. I spoke to Mo Kennedy, the executive director of the National Association of School Resource Officers, about the impact this could have on school safety.
I just want to start with your initial reaction to moves and calls to remove officers from school campuses.
Disappointed is my initial reaction. I think it's a very bad mistake. I think that it's probably being done in a very quick knee-jerk manner without giving a lot of thought to it. It's interesting that in most places that it's happening, they happen to be districts and agencies who have not come to us for training. We have a national model of best practices. We've been conducting training for school-based officers for almost 30 years. And, you know, that's a credit to our membership and the work that so many have done to build a really excellent curriculum, one that some of the Department of Justice hold up as the gold standard.
In many states, Black students are more likely to be arrested on campus than non-Black students. Is there training within your program that pertains to implicit bias or social issues?
First of all, let me address the issue of arrests and students. The data that I've seen around that relates specifically to schools and from a nationwide standpoint does not specifically separate out school resource officers from responding patrol officers. There's a dramatic difference when you're a school that does not have an officer in your school and you're calling dispatch, you're calling the police department or sheriff's office to send someone for help. Well, they're sending a patrol deputy or a patrol officer, maybe more than one. There's a much greater likelihood that's going to end in an arrest, as opposed to an officer that has a relationship with a school, works in there every day, and understands the other resources that are in that school. We've had implicit bias in our basic course for several years now. We had a great group of professional folks spend a lot of time with us writing that curriculum and training our instructors on it.
Are there adjustments you think that need to be made at this juncture?
It's interesting you asked that question. I think the adjustment that needs to be made is one we've been calling on for a long time. As a matter of fact, just a little less than 2 years ago, we were at the White House testifying before the Federal Commission on School Safety. And we were very clear in our concerns that every officer working in a school in this country, we need to make sure that they're, one, carefully selected and that they're specifically trained. We would like to see every SRO, every school officer come through our basic course so that we know they're getting a healthy dose of implicit bias, a healthy dose of adolescent brain development, of adolescent mental health information, of special needs information, so that then we know that everyone's being trained consistently. And then, of course, they need to attend the other trainings within their state. It needs to be an ongoing issue. So selection, training across the board.
We want to give you a quick update from Capitol Hill. The House passed Democrats sweeping George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, including banning chokeholds and an overhaul of qualified immunity. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell has said the bill will go nowhere in the upper chamber. The competing proposal from the Senate GOP was blocked by Democrats who said it does not go far enough, effectively creating a stalemate.
The House is honoring his life and the lives of all killed by police brutality by saying never again.
Instead of getting 70% of what you wanted, today and tomorrow and next week, you get 0. And you're going to wait until the election to get more.
Every child should leave school every day more well than when they showed up.
Coming up after the break, addressing racial inequity and implicit bias in the classroom. We speak to an expert about what change looks like. Stay with us.
We are rolling out a mini-series on ethnic studies so that students can see positive representations of themselves, of African Americans who've contributed to the state, of Latinos, of individuals of Asian Pacific Islander descent, of Native Americans.
California Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond is addressing the issues of racial justice in public schools with a new ethnic studies curriculum. Thurmond also launched implicit bias training for all of the department's 2,500 employees. For more on educational equity, I spoke to San Francisco State Professor Jeff Duncan Andrade.
When you see the moves that the California Department of Education is taking to deal with racial injustice, tell me your thoughts.
To be frank with you, I think that policy doesn't work. People work. And it's not that you'd never catch me saying policy doesn't matter, because of course policy matters. I taught under No Child Left Behind. I've been a teacher and a school leader in Oakland for nearly 30 years now. So I know that policy matters, and there's certain policies that emerge that make it easier for us to do the kind of work that needs to be done in schools to support the most wounded ones. And there's policies that make that work much more challenging to do. So I think that it does matter what kind of policy Tony and his team and the kind of broader set of politicians that find themselves interested in the state of public education in California. It does matter what they do. But at the end of the day, it really is about what kind of resources and support and innovation and commitment can we make at local levels to allow people that are actually going to have to execute on the policy to be able to do that, and to do that in a way that allows them the space, time, and resource not just to fail, but to learn from their failure. Are policymakers going to finally get out of the chair and get on the ground and really spend time with young people and families and educators that have been doing this for a long, long time, but are very rarely brought to the table to talk about what kind of policy we would need to actually move the project forward?
Professor, you talk a lot about building confidence of students, and how important is that when you're talking about closing the achievement gap specifically for Black and Brown students in the public school system?
What's so beautiful about the Black Lives Matter movement and all the kind of collective push around this is that they have been and are continuing to say, no, you're not going to individualize this. This is structural, okay? And the same is true for schools. And so SEL has become about, well, let's locate the problem in the individual child, and then let's fix the child. Well, the child's not broken. The system's broken. The society's broken. And so you can try all you want to fix a child. The child is simply a mirror into our society. They're reflecting back to you what we've done to children, what we've done to Black people, what we've done to Indigenous people for hundreds and hundreds of years. That's what's showing up. That's the woundedness. That's not broken. Children are not broken. The central purpose and tenet of a public education system in a pluralistic multiracial democracy should be wellness. That every child should leave school every day more well than when they showed up. Now, in order to really do that and not have it be what SEL has become, which is a program that you tap into to fix the broken ones, right? But instead to say, no, this is institution-wide, tip to finish, edge to edge, top to bottom. This is what we do in this school. We do youth wellness. These investments in schools, right, aren't just an investment in an individual child. They're an investment in transforming our society.
Powerful message. Our thanks to Jeff there. Kingmakers of Oakland is an organization that for more than the last decade have worked in the Bay Area and beyond to improve educational and life outcomes for Black students. They've also created a documentary about their foundation, which you will see clips from during my interview with CEO Chris Chapman.
Chris, thanks for joining us. You recently worked with the California Department of Education to address issues of implicit bias and institutional racism. But this is something that Kingmakers of Oakland has been working on for a long time. Tell our viewers a little bit about your efforts.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, want to pay homage to Oakland Unified School District, because the theory of action and the work that Kingmakers of Oakland does really is nested in the theory of action that was born out of Oakland Unified School District some 10 years ago. And the frame that we use really is healing the fish while treating the toxic ecosystem. So our work is not about fixing Black boys. That we posit Black boys are brilliant and beautiful beyond measure, but we send them into a system that really structurally and fundamentally breaks down their spirit and doesn't manifest the possibility of their greatness. And so within Oakland Unified School District, basically we created a set of strategies that really inoculate Black boys and really engage, encourage, and empower them so they understand who they are and whose they are, while simultaneously really addressing from the grass tops to the treetops what we call the toxic ecosystem, which is the public school system, on how we really address the systems, the structures, the condition, and the culture that, when that's addressed, leads to improved educational life outcomes for Black boys. And that now is the work of Kingmakers of Oakland that works with Oakland Unified School District, but districts across the country.
Chris, one of the things, and you kind of touched on it in the message from Kingmakers, is when you work with these Black students, you ask, how do you see yourself?
Yes.
And I think that's so important. How important is the answer to that, especially what we're seeing across the country right now?
When you have a young African-American male student who we refer to as kings, understand who they are and whose they are, they really have then the audacity then to really access all of the academic skills, also all of the social capital and networks to manifest greatness. And so that, we believe, greater than the traditional academic metrics, that the metrics of self-identity, cultural identity, and self-efficacy really are the indicators of kind of self-actualization. And so it's important at this point now that we really understand the importance and the power that Black lives truly matter.
What does change and what does progress look like to you, especially at the school level?
Yeah, you know, public school systems too have a extraordinary moment in time where we have the situation that COVID brought on around distance learning, let alone now understanding the importance that we have to acknowledge structural racism and Eurocentricity. And so schools now really have an extraordinary opportunity to be intentional and unapologetic around the students they have marginalized over decades, and really bring them into center and begin to co-construct a school system in service of Black and brown children. And that is the opportunity we've been afforded. And so the opportunity from changing the curriculum. So how do we evolve curriculum from preschool through 12th grade that's no longer Eurocentric, but lifts up, you know, our European history, but also our African history, our Rasa studies and indigenous history, as well as the history of Asian Pacific Islanders. And that cannot just be manifest in a 10th grade ethnic studies course or a Black History Month or a Rasa studies course. That really we have a moment in time where we have to rewrite the curriculum in language arts, in math, in science, in history, and our elective classes from preschool through 12th grade that lift up the cultural prosperity of people of color.
We have to use the current events as a prompt to sit down and have difficult conversations.
Coming up after the break, talking to children about racism, protests, and creating change. We'll get tips from an expert on how parents can begin the difficult discussion. Stay with us.
I want you a picture of what Elmo wants. All of us loving each other.
Earlier this month, CNN and Sesame Street teamed up for a special talking to children about prejudice and the protests. It also taught lessons on embracing diversity and empathy towards others. So how important is it to talk to kids about the issues we discuss on this show and at the heart of calls for change worldwide? Crucial, says clinical psychologist Dr. Christina Iglesia.
Doc, thanks for joining us. When you look at this watershed moment for the country, how important is it for parents to have these conversations with their kids about social justice, racial inequality, and really about mental health?
I think this is the exact time we have to be having these conversations. If we choose to be silent, we are missing an opportunity to be having difficult conversations about very real issues that are happening in the world. COVID is not the only pandemic at hand. We have to be talking about things like racism, bias, covert discrimination versus overt discrimination. These are all things that are heavily impacting people across the nation, and it is causing people to feel increased anxiety, trauma responses, depression. We have to look at how not only is this affecting people collectively, but how is it affecting people in our own households and ourselves?
Doc, breaking this down a little bit, we've talked to a lot of interracial families, a lot of African-American families about having the talk with their kids, which really relates to how they interact with police. How would you recommend parents have that conversation of making their kids know that they are safe?
I think part of it is about highlighting all the ways people are not safe, and using that as a discussion point that there are still, unfortunately, a lot of ways that Black children aren't safe. And how do we talk about ways that they could be safer and ways that they could communicate with family and friends and checking in so that they can feel safer in the community that they're part of?
Doctor, you talk about all families. Now, when we talk about Caucasian white families, how important is it to address raising kids that are anti-racist or explaining the meaning of prejudice to them?
Yes, I think the term anti-racist needs to be part of every dinner conversation. It is no longer acceptable just to not be racist. We have to be anti-racist, which means we all individually and collectively need to be doing the work to learn and also unlearn a lot of the racial biases that exist. We have to be checking in with ourselves as adults and as parents and see, where are we with these things? How much racial bias do we hold? And how can we do the work so that the conversations we're having with our children can feel authentic and a way to connect and doing more awareness around the things that directly and indirectly impact so many people. So if you're able to sit and do your own work, then you can sit with your child and have these conversations about how racism does exist and what is our role individually and as a community to combat it. What do we do when we see it out in the open? How can we ourselves be allies and advocates for the people who are still oppressed?
I want to thank all of our guests for coming on today, engaging in some very important conversations. We'll keep the discussions going next Sunday morning. Again, to everyone celebrating online, happy Pride. Wishing you all a great and healthy Sunday.